Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 390 of the Black and Gold Hockey Podcast. We are back after a long hiatus due to the first 6 weeks of the Bruins offseason, but we are back in living color. I am joined today by David Collins. David, how you doing?
Fellas, it's been an interesting start to the offseason. I do love offseason time. Looking forward to see what the Bruins do for the rest of the offseason and, move into training camp. But for today, I'm looking forward to getting some details about, coaches, draft, free agency. Let's see what today brings.
Parker McLean's here. Parker, how you doing?
Happy to be back, Sam. It's been a while since I've been on this program, but happy to talk a little bit of men's worlds too.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about that coming up in just a bit. And Tom Calautti's here. Tom, how's it going?
Oh, it's going well, Sam, and it's about to be going a lot better.
Glad to hear that. Today, we're going to be discussing the extension of Don Sweeney. We're going to be talking about the Men's World Championship Tournament and how the Bruins did in that tournament. We're going to be talking about if Matt Poitras has a spot in the team and who the hell the Bruins coach is going to be next year. All that and more coming up here on the Black and Gold Hockey Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Those who are watching on Facebook, Twitch, X, YouTube, and for the first time, we are live on Kick. So thank you all for coming by. Appreciate you being here. And also to those listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, thank you all for listening in today. Give us a 5-star rating and a nice review. It helps us out big time. And let's get into conversation because the Bruins fan base freaked out when on a random morning we woke up to news that Don Sweeney was extended by the Boston Bruins for another 2 years. Now, this came as a surprise. I honestly didn't see it coming because we heard during that horrible end-of-the-year press conference that happened at the end of the season that, Sweeney was in a contract year. He was in a year that, was going to make or break his tenure as the Bruins general manager. Now he gets another 2 years. David, I'm going to start with you. What was your reaction when the Bruins extended Sweeney just a couple weeks ago?
I feel like Cam Neely isn't great on thinking off his feet sometimes. Like the comment about Jeremy Swayman having 64 million reasons why he'd be here. According to Swayman's agent, that was the first time they heard it, and it comes out in a public press conference. So I think he was kind of caught off guard a little bit and didn't really know what to say in terms of what Don Sweeney was going to be moving forward, if he was going to be re-signed, if they were going to do it later. It very much felt like a wait and see approach, but it's hard to really believe anything that Cam Neely says in a press conference because you don't know who's heard it before we have. I was fine with it. I expected it. It's really hard. Mark Allred has said time and time again, it's very hard to sign a coach to a long-term contract if you don't have a GM under contract. If he goes into last year of his deal, any head coach that knows they have a chance somewhere else, or maybe if they wait a year and go somewhere else the following year, maybe they'll get to pick their own GM. Maybe there'll be a new GM that comes in and gets a 5-year deal. Then they can go there with some security. But coming into a situation where your GM is on the last year of his deal, that could be a pretty quick turnaround for a head coach, especially if things go south. So I think it was a smart move by the Bruins. Of course, it does seem like it split the fan base again, which seems to be a common theme for the Bruins these days. It seems like everyone is divided in their feelings about it. I think it was a good idea. I think it'll make hiring a head coach easier. Obviously, we haven't gotten there yet, but I think it will help a head coach come in and feel more confident. And it's not a crazy long-term contract. I believe it's this year plus 2 years, correct?
It's this year and another 2. So his contract would be up at the end of the 27-28 season. Yeah.
Right. So it is very much a bridge contract to see where the Bruins are in 3 years. And I would assume being on a 3-year deal to make it easier to fire them too if things do go south before those 3 years are up, rather than sign them to a 5-year deal, a 7-year deal. I do give Sweeney a bit of credit. A lot of people give him grief because of 2015, and he hasn't been great at drafting. But if you look at the Bruins since he's taken over, the Bruins had the longest playoff streak, or they were tied for the longest playoff streak dating back to 2015. They were due for a down year. And I guess this is the down year we're talking about. But Sweeney has done some good things. I think he's a guy that is going to learn from his mistakes. I think we're starting to see a bit of a shift when you look at the way that he handled the trade deadline this year. So I am open to giving him a second chance based on, recent history. And I'm looking forward to what he can do with a higher draft pick. If you look back at his drafting history, outside of 2015, the highest draft pick he had was, I believe it was 13th, was the year that they took McAvoy.
Mhm.
So everything after that was, either traded or later in the first round. So I'm interested to see what kind of stuff he can get done with a top 7 pick.
I completely agree. I think the extension of him was not, I don't think it was because of the complete 100% job he's done. It's probably to most likely get a coach, because the report came out that Rick Tocchet didn't want the Bruins job because because of Sweeney's recent history with firing coaches and the fact that the GM was on an expiring deal, Parker.
Well, exactly that, right? And you think about kind of what's to come for this Bruins team. All Bruins fans, close your ears. The next 3 years probably won't be that great. But you also see it by the end of that third year, we'll see where this team is heading, whether it's a shot at a playoff run or it's a complete collapse. So I think you give Sweeney 3 years, a chance to sort of retool this team, and then you evaluate his performance from there.
Completely agree. Tom?
I think what people have to realize about the Don Sweeney extension is that the 2023 and 2024 season saved Don Sweeney's job. Once he put together that record-setting regular season, and once he took a team that lost its top 2 centers, in addition to guys like Taylor Hall and Tyler Bertuzzi, and made the second round of the playoffs, went to Game 6 against the eventual Stanley Cup champion, you're not going to fire that guy after one down season. He saved his job after that happened. I think the extension was necessary given the Rick Tocchet report and the fact that legitimate coaching hires and coaching candidates who could really help this team were backing away because of Sweeney's future. I just think it shows a little bit of the arrogance that the Bruins organization and Bruins management has had. They backed themselves into a corner again, and I feel like they've done this time and time again. They obviously weren't ready to fire Sweeney if they wanted to. They didn't have anything in place, and they didn't have any measures that showed that they wanted to let him go, despite the sentiment around the fan base. And although I think Sweeney did a fine job at the deadline gathering assets, I like that this is just a bridge deal because now the onus is all on him. There's no more dicking around, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
It's going to be his responsibility to get this train back on the tracks, and if he doesn't, he has to be out. Now, I think we're going to be having a different conversation if, say, next year goes, just as poorly as this one, and Sweeney's still around. But this extension needed to happen. You weren't going to get a coach, and you weren't going to be able to move forward. It's like being able to find closure. You need to find that before you move forward. And they needed to extend Sweeney simply because they needed a GM. So give him the opportunity to get the train back on the tracks. If he doesn't, he's out.
To right his wrongs, right? And I think he's had his fair share of wrongs in his tenure. I don't think anybody will. I even think Don has admitted that himself on a couple of different occasions that he, made mistakes. And I think this deal is giving him a chance to win back the fan base, which is going to be a really hard thing to do. And secondly, you're right to get the train back on the tracks, right his wrongs, fix his mistakes. And I think, giving him that 2-year deal, that means he has 3 years to figure this out. And if he doesn't, gone. And I think that's a fair assessment, for a guy who's been here for a decade, a cup final appearance, playoff appearances almost every year he's been the GM besides a few years. I think it's fair. Now, what the fan base thought, the fan base reacted immediately and they were panicking. And it got to the point where Bruins social media admins were deleting comments. Like, that's how bad it got. So the fan base was upset, but if you sit back and you actually think about it, that is the reason why. You don't have to like it, but that's the reason why. And I think people need to learn, hey, there's got to be a reason for this. There can't just be, oh, we're doing this out of spite. No, there has to be a reason. So I don't know. My phone.
I think.
My phone blew up.
Sorry, Sam.
Yeah, my phone blew up during this. Everybody was like, what are they doing? And I explained it the same way we explained it. He has a chance to fix his mistakes. So I understand. And plus, just because they extended him doesn't mean that if they have another shitty year next year, they could fire the guy, and then that 2-year extension gone means nothing. It doesn't kick in. It doesn't matter. They gave him a contract for to try for leeway to try to get a coach. That's pretty much one of the main reasons they got him, David. So, David, you want to go ahead?
You guys want to, I don't know, maybe you guys have already looked it up. You want to take a stab at how many GMs have been tenured longer than Don Sweeney currently?
I think it's 2. I might be wrong.
Anyone else want to throw in a guess?
I'm going to put up 3.
I'm going to put up 1.
So there's 3.
So
Don Sweeney has been the general manager since May 20th, 2015. Jim Nill has been the GM at Dallas Stars since 2013. Kevin Cheveldayoff took over in Winnipeg in 2011, and Doug Armstrong with the Blues has been there since 2010. I watch a lot of sports, so I follow a lot of different teams in a lot of different leagues. And one thing that you see with the GMs that have been tenured for a long time is their ability to adapt when the game starts changing. And I don't know if I'd say that Don Sweeney has adapted well, but again, considering the fact that he's had I think it was a 10-year playoff streak, like that has to account for something. Like, yes, they didn't go as far in the playoffs as they wanted to, but getting to the dance, that alone shows that they're, one of the top 8 in their conference. They're one of the top 16 in the league. That goes a long way. But yeah, the ability to be able to adapt to the game changing is very important. And I think that's what this summer is, or I guess the next 3 years is going to show us is, can we get away from that big bad Bruins mentality and move into more of an offensive minded team? The teams that are winning now are scoring a lot of goals. Yes, you have Florida who are doing their best to be the big bad Bruins type of play, but Sam Bennett and Kachuk out there throwing bodies and stuff, but they're scoring a lot of goals on top of that. So it'll be interesting to see if we can kind of move towards an offensive-minded team, and then also if we can look into, kind of letting our younger players grow more. And I think a lot of that boils down to Don Sweeney's mindset. So yeah, I'm very interested in this offseason. I'm very interested in training camp, and I'm very interested to see how many players, let's say under the age of 25, start on the Bruins next year, because I feel like it could go one of two ways.
Yeah, completely agree. Parker?
Yep. Nope, not much more to add there.
Tom?
Yeah, I really think we're getting down to the point where Sweeney could be, looking over the horizon, and this could be the end. I mean, for the first time in a while, management, although they performed poorly in that end-of-year press conference, I mean, I could do hours on just how badly that was handled from a PR perspective. I think you had the fact that they only signed him to a 2-year extension shows me that there's at least somewhat of an admission that, we know things aren't going great. And Charlie Jacobs and management even put out a statement to that effect. How much, the words behind that, how truthful are they? We don't know. But I think we are getting to a point where it's time to put up or shut up for Don Sweeney. And he talked about evolving the offense. He talked about finding a coach that can help push them in that direction. Let's see if he can adapt, if he can rebuild this team on the fly the way he did in 2015. If he can do it, great, he stays. If not, you gotta cut ties sooner rather than later.
Yeah, completely agree. And let's talk about some of those players that were looking towards the future in the Men's World Tournament that happened over the past few weeks, and a lot of Bruins were in that tournament. Let's first chat about Don Zlishmelis. Okay, he played for Latvia and apparently set the world on fire because he had a great tournament for Latvia. The number one takeaway I had was when you get told by Sidney Crosby, one of the greatest players of all time, that you are, that you're going to be the future and you have a hell of a career in front of you, Parker, that's a really good thing to hear from a guy who's been there, done that.
Just Sidney Crosby, Sam. Come on.
Yeah.
But like the thing, like for people that have watched these international tournaments in years past, especially with a guy like Don Calautti, you know that he is the future of Latvian hockey, and he's been that guy for years now. And it's not even been even when he was younger, right? He wasn't as well known maybe in North America, but he was always the guy for this Latvian team. So to see him finally making the headlines on this big stage doesn't surprise me, to say the least.
Not at all. David, you are a big Don Lushmelis fan. How happy are you to hear about Lushmelis's performance in the tournament?
I've been following Lushmelis since his U19s, and just watching it, like I would never watch a Latvian game just because it's terrible. But as soon as I heard about this kid, I was like, I have to tune in. I have to watch this, and immediately I was hooked. He just if you watch back when he played the U19s, if you watch back and look at him lined up with his other teammates, he just looked different. He just looked faster. He looked stronger. He looked like he had higher IQ than everyone else on his team. And for him to still be able to put up points when the defensive teams can kind of lock in on him and be like, okay, if we shut this kid down, they're not going to win. That's impressive. Like, you could almost double team this dude in the offensive zone, and he's still putting points up. He came into the AHL. He lit the world on fire again. He had a great year for UMass. He went to Worlds and got basically a standing ovation from arguably the best player to ever play hockey. Like, that is unbelievable. And he is one of the few people that is on a absolute no way am I trading this dude list for me going into the Bruins season right now. The fact that they drafted this kid in the third round too, like, I don't know if it's because he was in Latvia and they weren't scouted as highly, but man, he has been an absolute stud so far. And a lot of people will say, oh, he's playing Worlds. Oh, he's playing U19 where the ice is bigger. This is a European game. But he came over and he played UMass. He came over and he went to the AHL and he did well. So he's already transitioned into that smaller ice surface, and he's looking like he is ready to play against NHL caliber players. And that's really big for a kid that is as young as he is in the situation he is right now. I think he's a lock to be in the AHL next season, if not the NHL. We'll see how training camp goes. But I do think he's one of those dudes that's going to make a push for a spot in the NHL.
Completely agree. New writer for BNG, Jack Studley, just put a great comment about Don Lushmelis, and I think this kind of sums it up. Diamond in the rough. Tom, what are your thoughts on that, and what are your thoughts on Don Lushmelis as a whole? So in that tournament,
I think as a Bruins fan, the only negative you can have about this is that he left the Providence Bruins playoff run to play at the Worlds. It looked like they maybe could have used him in that last round, but I echo everything David and Parker said. I mean, the fact that he left the Providence Bruins to be the first line center for Latvia, he is the poster boy for that country now. He is the player that other defenses need to worry about. Every cliche you have about, you need to shut down the other team's best players. He was that guy. And to put up 6 points, 4 goals, and 2 assists in 7 games with his best winger being Kaspers Daugavens is nothing short of fantastic. I mean, when I saw that name, I had flashbacks to 2013. But wow. I'm a UMass grad, so I watched a lot of UMass hockey. And what really impressed me there was Lushmelis' ability to play make and facilitate. There are a lot of good goal scorers on that UMass team. So I think he really let his shooting and goal scoring ability take a back seat so he could kind of set up other players. And the fact that he's been able, both in Providence and the Worlds, to bring that goal scoring touch, use his shot, which even Greg Carvel said he's a better shooter than people give him credit for. It just, any question I've had about him so far, I thought size might be an issue for him. He handled that well at the Worlds. I thought he might be too pass first. He might be too much of a facilitator. He scored 4 goals in 7 games. I mean, every time a test has come up for this kid, he's passed it. And that's exactly what you want to see in a prospect.
For me, I have a checklist of things that I want to see in a prospect. For Lushmelis, check, 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 check. Every time there is something I'm like, okay, can he play against NHL talent? Check. Can he score goals at a high rate? Check. Can he create play? Can he create offense? Check. You know, that for me is something that I want to see out of an offensive prospect who, if I'm going to be completely honest, he's not going to start in the NHL, but he could end up in the NHL for a lot of that season next year if he keeps producing like this and he keeps moving along, moving forward, progressing. I'm not saying he's going to be a full-time NHLer by the end of the next season. I think that's a little ridiculous, but I mean, it could be and might not be. I don't know, but I think he's going to get a look in the NHL next year, especially if it's another year like this year. There's no hurt in bringing a guy up and seeing what you have for 10 games or something like that. So it would be foolish not to see what you have. Excuse me, to see what you have in Lushmelis. I think that's a great start to a young career for a guy who's going to be. Sorry, there's sirens going by. A great start for a young career for a guy who's going to be something special. I think that's for sure. Another guy we should look at. The resurgence of Elias Lindholm.
He's back, baby.
Where did this come from? Where did this come from? Dude, I believe he led the entire tournament in goals. Am I correct about that? Was the end of the season when he was playing with Geeky and Pasternak, was that the little bump he needed so that when he played in the tournament in the Worlds, he just went off? I don't know what that was about. David, I'll start with you. Elias Lindholm, is he back?
I'm not going to jump on the bandwagon too soon, but what I will say is that I think it's evident that he is recovered from whatever was nagging him early in the year. If you look at the way that he closed out the season, the way that he played in Worlds, I think it's very easy to tell that he's healthy. The fact that he was able to do it in the NHL before going to Worlds is also something to keep an eye on. He was heating up. I think we can all agree on that one. He was heating up at the end of the season. He looked good offensively. He didn't look out of place, and he didn't get lost in the shuffle like a lot of players do when the season's going to shit like that. He came out after he got healthy and he looked good. He played 10 games in the Worlds. He had eight goals, 6 assists, and he had a +8 in his plus-minus rating. So, he played fantastic. He played on the wing rather than as a center at Worlds, so that might be a little bit different for him. I don't know if something that they're going to look at moving forward. With the resurgence of players, we're going to get into this later, but with the resurgence of the young centers coming through, we have Casey Middlestat now, and then you have Fraser Minton that you're looking at, and Matt Patra's still on the team right now. Don Lushmelis is listed as a center as well. So with all these young centers coming through, it's possible they could look at moving him to the wing as well. And maybe he fits better there. Maybe it helps his offense a little bit more if he's on the wing. But that's one of those to be determined type of scenarios. I feel really good for the guy. He is a very likable player. He seems like a dude that's very easy to cheer for. So seeing him do so well at Worlds made me feel good. And I think it gave him a lot of confidence. And now we just have to hope that he has a healthy summer and he comes into Bruins camp looking like he did to end the season and then also in Worlds.
Completely agree with that. Parker, what are your thoughts on Elias Lindholm's tournament?
What I will say is for the start of this tournament for Sweden, they kicked it off the real impressive win. I think it was 5-0 win over Slovakia. And then they proceeded to play really poorly their next, I think, 3 or 4 games in the round robin. The only thing that worked on that Swedish team was Elias Lindholm. So whether it was him on the power play, whether it was him 5-on-5, whatever it might have been, he was impressive in all facets of the game. So whether that's him playing in Sweden, maybe the Bruins should ship up to Sweden. Maybe that's how they can find a little bit more success. But I think that if he can play the way he did at the Worlds next year for the Bruins, it'll be an impressive year for him.
A bounce back year, especially after the 22-23 campaign where he put up almost 80 points, 70, 80 points in that season. It was a career year for him. Tom, does this little segment of games in that World Tournament, does this propel him to getting back to what he should have been when the Bruins signed him in the beginning of last summer?
Well, I think a lot of people knew when they signed Elias Lindholm, he wasn't going to be the 42 goal guy he was in that one breakout year when he played alongside Matthew Tkachuk and Johnny Gaudreau. But if you look at his career, he's been a steady 20 goal scorer when he's been able to play with talent. And when you're playing alongside a guy like David Pastrnak, you're almost by default going to be able to put up points. What really encouraged me was Lindholm's goal scoring, because through a lot of the year, I don't know if the fans out there are into advanced analytics, he was one of the worst finishers in the league, meaning that he's getting opportunities. He's literally just not putting the puck in the back of the net. So seeing him be able to actually do that, I know it seems like a real simplification of NHL offenses, but just the ability to score, seeing him be able to do that, gain his confidence back, and really look physically healthy. I think I could tell early on this season that something wasn't right with him. And you saw, I mean, the last 7 games of the year, he had 9 points. I think it was 5 goals and 9 points in his last 7 games. And again, he's playing with Pastrnak and Geekie, but he had opportunities with Pastrnak early in the season and just didn't look right. So I think the fact that he got his goal scoring touch back, the fact that he has his confidence back, and the fact that he's healthy is huge for the Bruins. And again, am I expecting a 35, 40 goal outburst? No. But I think you should see a season. You can expect, if he's playing right, a 55 to 60 point season with over 20 goals. And if he's playing as well as he does defensively in the middle, if he can bring that defensive presence, that's really all you can ask for.
Yeah, completely agree. Elias Lindholm making his presence felt in that tournament. Parker?
And one other thing I might add on top of that is he was playing third line. Like, it wasn't like he was playing, top line with the best players on Sweden. He was playing third line on that team and still led it in goal scoring. So I think you look at it, it's not like he was playing alongside like Zibanejad or Raymond or Carlson. He was playing with the guys like Wenberg. Like, it's not the guys who you're expecting to be a part of that 8-goal tournament for him. It's, guys that are a little bit lower on the depth chart on the pecking order. And I think that's a really good sign for the Bruins team ahead.
I could introduce the fact that maybe he was already used to that, because remember, after the trade deadline, Elias Lindholm was on the third line, and he was playing with Marat Husnudinov and Vinny Lettieri on that third line for a lot of the final 6 weeks of the season. So maybe it was a chance to kind of say, hey, I am the best player in this line. I'm going to act like that. And hey, he came out and scored 8 goals in 10 games. I can't complain about that. So that's a really encouraging thing. Speaking of encouraging, David Pastrnak was named the best player in the tournament. And I think that there is a reason why. He was named the IIHF Directorate Top Forward Award winner. Along with Elias Lindholm, he was named to the Media All-Star team at the championship tournament. David Pastrnak is continuing to show why he's most likely going to be the captain of this team next season, David?
Yeah, he in the Worlds, I think he was tied for like 6th in goals and tied for 2nd in assists. One thing I'll say about Pastrnak, and I guess you can put this as a positive for Don Sweeney if you want, but that contract that they signed him to is going to look like such a luxury deal in a couple of years when you start seeing what dudes this offseason and next season are going to get for contracts. It's going to be mind-blowing how we have David Pastrnak for $11 million a year. I can promise you that. He's a machine. He's everything that you want in a hockey player, and he just continues to, crude language here, but he continues to go out there and swing his dick around and let everyone know that he's the man. He finished the season with the Bruins he would have been in the MVP race had he, had the Bruins been doing better. I have no doubt about that one. And he continued it in Worlds. He's just, earlier in the season, he was all about passing. And people got upset because he wasn't shooting enough. And then he started shooting more again. And then he found that nice little in between when to shoot, when to pass. And then he goes to Worlds and he just continues on. I mean, to be named, I know that, the some teams were still in the playoffs with the NHL or whatever. But to be named the best player in the tournament, no matter what tournament you're in, has to feel good. And I think it was deserved. Yeah, obviously they didn't win the tournament, but I think he was arguably the best player. Maybe it's not even an arguable point. But moving into next season, again, you're going to hear me say this a lot this summer, but a healthy offseason is going to be very important for the Bruins moving into next season. And David Pastrnak is going to take them as far as he's going to take them. Just, hop on the train, get out of the way, and let's see where this team goes.
I completely agree with that. Parker?
Yeah, I think when you look at this Czech team this year, they lost one game. Or one game that mattered, basically, which ended up hurting them because they lose the game against the U.S. It puts them to the 3rd seed in Group B. Then they have to play Sweden, which frankly means that they're not going to beat Sweden because Sweden at this tournament was, in my eyes, the best team on paper at this tournament. I know Canada, and we'll talk about Canada later, I'm sure. But for this Czech team this year, they had high hopes, and they lost one game to the U.S., which ended up hurting them, and that's what knocked them out of the tournament. But they win that game. In my eyes, David Pastrnak leads them to likely the gold medal game where they probably have a shot to win it. I don't know if they win it or not, but at the very least, they have a shot to win it. So I think as far as for this Czech team goes and for David Pastrnak, it's a tournament still to be proud of, and now it's just a matter of bringing that to the Bruins season next year.
Yeah, completely agree with that. Tom, what are your thoughts on Pasternak's tournament?
He's one of the best players in the world, and now that's undisputable. He's a star in this league on and off the ice, and he's further proving that he's somebody you build around, both as a franchise centerpiece and I think as a leader. And I think that's the biggest thing. We all knew he was this talented. We all knew he had the ability to put up these points. I mean, I remember when I was writing my recap for BNG of the Worlds, I saw his stats and it didn't even raise an eyebrow. It's just, that's what you expect from him at this point. I think it's more his leadership and what he brings intangible wise. A lot of guys on the team, especially like Morgan Geekie and Nikita Zadorov, talked about Pasternak's evolution over the season, how he developed as more of a vocal leader. And I think you saw the way he led the Czech team. He has the ability now to both say, everybody get on my back. I'll carry this team as far as I can take it, and be that leader in the locker room. And if you're a Bruins fan, you can't ask for any more from him. It's just another example of how he's growing as a person and how he's becoming an even greater player.
Absolutely. Pastrnak showed me down the stretch after they traded Marchand, and in this tournament, he should be the captain of this team next season. I never thought I'd say that. I remember 1 year ago on this very program, all right, I'm coming up on my 1 year anniversary with BNG. 1 year ago, I said on my very first program, or one of my first ones, that that Charlie McAvoy should be the next captain of this team because David Pastrnak is not a leader. Well, I'm an idiot because apparently he might have heard me. I don't know because apparently he is now, and he's a great one at that. So I'm really happy for him. Parker, you mentioned
like that Jordan meme, Sam.
What's that?
It's like that Jordan meme where he's like, and I took offense to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. Sorry, David. Hopefully you figure it out. Parker, you mentioned Team Canada, and I have to bring it up since there's two Canadians on this panel. Bro.
I don't like you. I do not like you.
You got to talk about it. You got to face the music.
Okay, Parker, I'm going to ask you first. What happened?
So you see, on home ice, there was Danish pastries. And because they were on home ice, the Danes fed Canada a whole bunch of pastries. So that's what someone wrote in my comment section. So I'm gonna go with that.
Yeah.
But they just overfed them on pastries. So that's why they looked a little slow, and then they lost that game because of the pastries.
So you're gonna blame the pastries. Okay. Yep. All right, great. David?
I don't want to talk about it. It hit hard, especially the fact that the States ended up winning after. But I mean, I'll just go and say that I don't know if this is true or not. You can say what you want, but most of the best Canadians were still in the NHL playoffs. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Hey, Sam, who won Four Nations again? Sorry, I can't remember.
Shut up.
Sorry, but who's that? Is that the oh no, wait, no, the US lost that one, didn't they?
And who got the assist on the winning goal? Is that future Bruin Mitch Marner?
That's future Vegas Golden Knight or Carolina Hurricane Mitch Marner.
You mean Utah Mammoth, baby?
Yeah. Tusks up.
Dude, if Mitch Marner ends up in Utah, I think that's actually a great thing for him. You want to know why? He won't be in anybody's shadow. He'll be the best player on that team. The only player comparable would be Clayton Keller. You know
where fans are going to leave him alone? Utah.
Yeah, he'll get out of a market where people shit on you. That's for sure. Yeah. You thought Toronto was bad. Ooh, Boston it can be bad too. Oh boy.
Yeah. That's one way to bring in viewership though. If he does go to a place like Utah, that'd be a great place to bring in viewership. We're getting off topic, but just wanted to point that out.
Completely agree. I think, I think the Bruins should. I mean, hey, look, if they take a swing at Marner, great. They shouldn't sign him. I will stick to that. I'm more of a Andrei Kuzmenko guy. That's just me. That's my personal take. I think I've said that on this show. I've said this on my streams before. Kuzmenko plays the Bruins game that they're lacking. He plays kind of a Jake DeBrusk game, which is what they're missing. So I think they should go after him in free agency if he makes the market. I heard the Kings might want to re-sign him. So if they don't re-sign him, the Bruins will take a swing. Anyway, that's besides the point. But yeah, you guys can have the Four Nations. You guys can have.
We'll see you at the Olympics, you Canadian cowards.
We'll see.
You will.
Yeah, you probably will.
Yeah, because that's where everybody's going to be all the best. It's going to be best on best and then some. It's going to be more than just Canada, Sweden, U.S., and Finland. It's going to be everyone else. Yeah. So should be interesting. And let's talk about the U.S. The U.S. win gold. Sorry, but this is good for the Bruins' sake because Peak, Lowry, and Swayman all get gold, which is going to lead me into my next conversation, okay? Peak had a great tournament. Lowry, not really sure what happened there. He didn't play any of the games. Hopefully there's nothing bugging him. But Jeremy Swayman, he needed this tournament. He absolutely needed this tournament. Goes 7-0, has a goals against average under 2, a 9.2 save percentage, something like that. He had a great tournament, and he kind of carried the U.S. to a gold. If I'm going to be completely honest, he kind of carried the U.S. to a gold, and thank goodness he did. Swayman is, he's not back. We don't know that, but he had a really, really good tournament, David. That's for sure. He had a really good tournament.
Yeah, I tried looking up his stats, but it's not easy to find. But from what I can see, during the preliminary round, he was 4-0, and he had a 1.97 goals against, and I think it was like a 9.25 save percentage. I think it stayed pretty consistent moving into the gold medal game. So I think it was around 2 goals a game, and then around 30 goals save percentage. And then he went undefeated, right? So States didn't lose, right? Yeah. And I guess the other side of it too, he played 7 games?
Yep.
7-0.
Yeah. So like the fact that he's able to play 7 games in a row, that has to be, a little bit of a confidence boost too. Everyone's saying, he plays better when other goalies play close to the same amount of games and he gets time off. Now he's playing 7 games in a couple of weeks and he's doing this. So that might be a bit of a confidence boost to him being like, you know what, maybe I can do this. Maybe I can play 60 games a season. I think Lindholm and Swayman are the 2 that needed this tournament the most, like for it to go the way it did. Swayman just came off of that big contract. We've talked about it all year. This was his first year being the man. He didn't have a full training camp. So I think that you're going to see a big jump from guys like Lindholm and Swayman moving into next season. He looked phenomenal. He looked like Jeremy Swayman of old. When he was making saves, he looked like he was enjoying himself again. It wasn't the Jeremy Swayman that you saw playing for the Bruins, who seemed a little bit tight. He couldn't move his blocker for some reason. He got beat blocker side way too many times. And he seemed unhappy. And there's a lot of pressure that comes with being the guy. And, he still is a young kid, and he's going through a transition phase of being the number one goalie after, obviously he sees the rumors about, we traded the wrong goalie. We should have kept Allmark, and, Korpisalo should play more and stuff like this. That'll weigh on a person. A lot of times we take these professional athletes and think they're robots, but they have feelings, they have thoughts too. So I am looking forward to seeing what he brings to training camp and then what he does next season. But yeah, just super positive. Also, I would like to mention that this is, for Bruins fans, this should also be a confidence booster. You look at what just happened with Ottinger, 2 goals on 2 shots, and he's making more than Swayman, and he gets pulled. Like that can't feel good as a Dallas Stars fan right now. So got a lot of confidence in Swayman moving into next season, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing that big smile back on his face after games.
Completely agree. Parker, 2-parter here for you. I know this is a big.
Here we go.
Yeah. So, first of all, what was your reaction to Swayman's tournament? Putting your bias aside for Canada, I get it, but Swayman having a good tournament has to be a good thing. Number one, and number two, are you glad the Bruins didn't trade him to the Oilers this during the trade deadline? Because there was a report that the Oilers were thinking about trying to trade for Swayman, according to Pinata of the fourth period. What are your thoughts on that?
So I'll start with the first part. And for Swayman, this term has been a really, really good for him. And I think you look at the overall outlook for the Bruins at this tournament, there's 4 players that I'd say really stood out to me. Swayman was one, Lachmelis was another, Pasternak, and future Bruin Marco Kasper was my 4th. They were outstanding for each of their respective countries. Swayman more or less led the U.S. to the gold and ended up winning them. And you also look at it, that the U.S. lost their game against the Swiss. And after that loss, I was curious to see what was going to come for them, whether they were going to bounce back and then, be that U.S. team that gives up a lot of chances and goes the other way and scores. And they did that. And sure enough, they play that offensive style. Joey Dacord was not great for the Americans at this year's tournament, but I thought that Swayman was kind of that factor that they really needed to win the gold. And we didn't see that at the Four Nations. Obviously, he was the third goaltender behind Hellebuck and Ottinger. Mm-hmm. And this tournament, the juniors, pretty much this entire international season has been a tryout for the Olympics and the eventual team that was going to be picked. And I think you look at what Swayman did at this tournament, he made a really good case for himself to be at next year's Olympics in Milan. So for Swayman, very happy for him. Great guy on and off the ice. And I think you look at what's to come for him, I think you'll see him on that Olympic team. And who knows, he might just be the backup goaltender for them. To your second part about Edmonton, I would very much like him to be on Edmonton right now, and then they can trade him back to Boston afterwards. Because go Edmonton. But I agree. Other than that, it's an unfortunate situation for him this year, right, where you're kind of just on the wrong end of a rough contract year, and it kind of spilled into the season. So you don't trade someone when they're down on value. It's a classic buy low, sell high. So for the Bruins, good thing they didn't sell high or sell low, buy high this year.
Yeah, completely agree with that. Tom, thoughts on Swayman's bounce back in this tournament and what that could lead to going into next season and into possibly the Olympics in February?
Well, I think David and Parker did a really good job of outlining just how dominant he was throughout the tournament. And the biggest takeaway for me was his performance in that gold medal game. You have a tight checking game where it's 0-0. Tage Thompson ends up scoring the golden goal. You win 1-0. Jeremy Swayman's kind of calling card over the past couple of seasons. He's been a good regular season goalie, but when the Bruins got into the playoffs in 2023-24, he was absolutely lights out. He was 100% their best player. And the fact that he still has that big game gene, he has that clutch gene that some other goalies, you look at Connor Hellebuck, that clutchness just goes right out the window when the playoffs happen. So I think you saw, even though I know Swayman had a hiccup game or two in the Worlds, he had a largely good tournament, and when the lights were the brightest, he was at its best. And that's what you really need in a goalie. You can have the best goalie in the regular season, but it's the hot goalies come May and June that win you Stanley Cups. And that's what you really want to see from Jeremy Swayman. As for what it brings for next season. You just have to hope that he can shake off whatever happened this season, whether it was the slow start, whether it was the bad blood between him and management over the contract. It just didn't look good. It didn't look right. David talked about his blocker. I thought at the end of the season, his glove wasn't even that great. I remember Nick Dowd scored a 2-on-1 goal on him where he just beat him glove side, and that can't happen against a bottom six forward. So I think Swayman is a big confidence guy. He's talked about it a lot, the mental side of the game, and I think this will allow him to go into next season with a fresh mindset, clear head, knowing that he is the guy in net for the Bruins, knowing now what it takes. He's had, the 60-game slate. He knows what it'll do to his body, what he has to do to stay in shape and, up to par with the physical side of the game. And I think he knows that net for the U.S. at the Olympics might very well be open. Bad playoff performance by Ottinger to end his season, a really bad playoff for Connor Hellebuck. That's, to quote Miracle, it's anyone's net right now. And if Jeremy Swayman can grab a hold of that, good for him. I mean, like I said, this guy is all about the mental side of the game, and the more confidence we can get him, the better.
Completely agree. Completely different topic. What's up with you, Parker, and Marco Kasper? I need you to explain. Marco Kasper, I don't even know what team he plays for. He's a former Red Wing. Explain. What does he bring that the Bruins could use? I don't know much about him. I'm going to be honest.
So there's Donj Lachmelis in Latvia, right, who had a really impressive tournament. On the other side, there's the winner of that tournament who ended up going to the quarterfinals with Marco Kasper, who more or less led Austria to the quarterfinals. And so I think that when you look at sort of that clutch gene, if you can get both those players for each of their respective countries, what more could you really ask for?
Interesting.
21-year-old with 19 goals this season for Detroit. I mean, I wouldn't hate that.
Yep.
Okay, there you go. All right. Well, if that's what I'm hearing, and if that's gonna be consistent, then sure. Why not? Why not? Yeah. Anyway, all right. Works for me.
And then you sign Nikolai Ehlers. You have the best player in 3 different countries, or 4 with Pasternak.
We'll see if he hits the market. I heard the Jets are going to be starting contract extension talks with him, so we'll see if he hits the market. I don't know. But speaking of another young player that his future is kind of up in the air right now, and it's Matt Poitras. Now, Matt Poitras is beloved by fans. People want to see him in the NHL roster. Understandable. But his NHL roster spot isn't guaranteed anymore. Before acquiring Fraser Minten, I would have said for sure Matt Poitras would be the third-line center next year. Now I'm saying it's Fraser Minten. And if they let John Beecher walk, then Poitras could be the fourth-line center. But I don't think that's good for his career. Tom shakes his head. I'm going to start with you. Will Matt Poitras be with the Bruins organization by the training camp?
That's a really good question. I'm going to say yes, simply because I don't think his value is high enough for them to get a lot in a trade for him. Mm-hmm. I think right now he's just a sweetener in a deal. So anything's possible. They could swing something, but I just feel like if they were to have traded him after the previous season and not this one, you maybe could have gotten more. But I think they are going to give him a chance to make the roster. And I'm not convinced that he stays at the center spot. When Jim Montgomery was still here earlier in the season, he talked about putting Poitras on the wing next to Trent Frederick in training camp. Poitras played the wing in the year prior to his draft year, so he's familiar with the position. I do think Fraser Minten is penciled in as that 3C. I think the Bruins view him as kind of Charlie Coyle light with the physical build he has, the way he's able to play the two-way game. Mm-hmm. And I think they really like that in their bottom 6 centers, their ability to deploy them against top-line guys and play a shutdown role and more chip in on offense than be offensive dynamos. So I think Poitras gets his shot on the wing this year, and I think this is kind of his put up or shut up year. I know we've been saying that for Fabian Lysell for years, but I mean, they have a logjam at center now. And, whenever you tweet that, people say, oh, none of them are good. Well, that doesn't matter. They still have too many of them, even if you don't like who they have there. You have Elias Lindholm. You're paying him $7.75 million. He's staying as your first-line center. As long as Casey Middlestad's here, they've shown no indication that they want to try him on the wing, which I would have done at the end of last season because it was a crapshoot. So you might as well try everything you have. So it looks like they like him there. If you like Mitten at 3C, you have Mark Kastelic at 4C. Try Patra on the wing. Give him an opportunity to decrease his defensive workload. Let him show off that ability to be a facilitator because he's best as a passer. Mm-hmm. Let him try to find his confidence because, again, like Jeremy Swayman, when he's confident, he can play well and go from there. I don't think he has a ton of value at this point. If he did, maybe a trade makes more sense. But I just feel like if you threw him in a potential trade for, say, a Marco Rossi, someone like that, I think him in a first doesn't get it done. I think you would need more. So just because of that, just because of where the value is, I think he's on this team at training camp, but I think he's competing for a wing spot, not a center spot.
Would you be opposed to having him compete for the third line right wing with Minton as the center and Patra as the right wing?
I would have no problem with that.
Okay. David, I'll go to you. Matt Patra as a right wing. What are your thoughts on that for next season if he were to make the NHL roster?
I feel like I haven't seen a whole lot of it, so it's hard to have an opinion on it. I feel like right wing, I have a bit of PTSD from how much we've talked about right wing over the past year. It seems like they went into last season needing a second line right wing, and they just never got one.
Not just last season. They never got one for David Krejci.
Yeah, fair. So if you look at the centers who are currently on the Bruins, you got, like you said, you're going to have Lindholm at 1, Middlestat as of right now. If he doesn't get traded, he's going to be at 2. Minton is going to be at 3, and then you're probably going to have Mark Kastelic on the 4th line. Right. And then you're looking at Donzo Schmellis is listed as a center. They're probably going to draft a center. So there's a lot of center depth right now. So somebody has to bite the bullet and go to the wing. So I think a lot of it is going to boil down to what is the trade value of a guy like Matt Patra? What is the trade value of a guy like Casey Middlestat? I think Casey Middlestat's contract works. It worked perfectly in the Charlie Coyle deal. Like it was almost identical to what Charlie Coyle was making. So if there's a team out there that could see Casey Middlestat being, a middle 6 center, I could see them moving on there just because of the depth that they'll have after this draft. And obviously after free agency too, if they want to take someone there. The thing with Matt Patra, he's only 21. Like he's still a kid. So, and don't forget, he had a lot of, I think it was a shoulder issue mostly this year when it came to the injury side of it. So I don't know if he ever really found his footing between the line shuffling that we dealt with early in the year, the stuff that we've dealt with the injuries. Then he goes back down to Providence and he looked pretty good there. He stayed there for a while, and then he stayed there till the end of the year. And, he looked good in the playoffs too. And I don't know, maybe he's one of those guys that starts off in Providence and then works his way back up. Or, maybe he's to the point now where he's kind of, driven himself out of town. But I keep reminding myself that he's only 21. He's only 21. He is a kid. And there's still room to grow. And there's room to get healthy. Like I said, I don't have much to talk about when it comes to him on the wing because I don't have anything to compare it to. His game, I think, would transition well. He likes being down in the corners. He likes racing down sidelines. I think he could do well as a winger. It's just a matter of, if he wants to and if the Bruins kind of see that. But I think we'll have a better understanding after the draft is over. Once the coach is in place, we'll know more about what the idea is for Matt Patra. And Craig Cooper, buddy of mine, says, go Habs, go. Fuck the Habs. And I just want to mention a little bit off higher here. Neil, you know the deal. Jack is a newcomer to BNG, so we'll explain it to him. And to Thierry Tari, we answer questions at the end of the program, so we'll definitely get to your questions then. But in the future, if you could hold them until the end of the program so they don't get lost in the shuffle, that'd be great.
We'll be answering questions near the end. That's really funny, that random Canadian shot. Yeah, I completely agree. I would not be opposed to seeing Poitras on the wing if he bulks up again. The main thing with Poitras is he gets knocked down really quick, okay? It's not just putting on weight for Poitras. He needs to put on muscle. And I think that is his main knock is the guy is small. And it's great that you can get down into the dirty areas and get those pucks and dig them free, which I think him and Minton on the third line would be a back checker's nightmare. But if he's on that third line, he needs to have more muscle to him. And I think if he has that, let's say he bulks up another 10 pounds and 8 of it is muscle, great. Or something, 15 pounds and 10 of it or 11 of it's muscle, great. It makes him more sturdy. It makes him more, it makes him stronger. And I think that's good for him. And I think it's good for all players involved. And I hope that doesn't affect his game too much, which it won't, I don't think. I think his game that he plays, if he's able to maintain his speed with the muscle he puts on, I think it's going to be good for his career down the stretch. Parker, Matt Poitras on the wing. Thoughts on that?
So I'll take this two ways. And Sam, I'll put this one back to you. What's been the biggest problem with Matt Poitras? You just said it.
His size.
His size. So do you think he'd be a good fourth line player?
No.
But now here's my question. At the start of this program, we were just talking about how we wanted to get away from the big bad Bruins. So if you put him on the fourth line and you say we're going to be a skilled team this year, does that now make sense for them?
If that's the fourth line they're going for, then sure. But remember, not every fourth line is like what the Bruins are doing, right? Not so. If that's what the Bruins are going to do, if they want to go, okay, we're going to go skill first, screw size, screw all that. We're going to go skill first and try to beat teams in speed. Great, but not every other fourth line and not every other lineup is like that. Look at Florida. Prime example. Look at Florida. They have found the perfect mesh of speed, skill, and size, right? Parker, I turn that back to you.
I agree. And I think you turn your team into a team like the Leafs, where you just have a bunch of skilled players running around with not a lot of size. So that's what I kind of asked, because I know you kind of brought it up a little bit at the in between when they were talking, where it was about what's to come for this Matt Poitras fourth line. Could it be? Could it not be? And I think there is a potential for it, but I think you're going to have to see this Bruins team really shift what they are right now. And what we've seen from years past, you still have the same GM in place. Yes, you'll get a new coach. I find it very doubtful to see Matt Poitras go to the fourth line, which then will feed into this third line discussion, where I agree. I think Minton is the next third line center. So then do you move him over to the wing? And I think what we've seen from years past is it's easier to move a player from center to wing than it is from wing to center. So for a guy like Matt Poitras, I think it might not be completely out of the cards for him to move to that wing spot. I just think that if you're trying to bring a winger into center, you're probably not going to get that done.
Yeah, completely agree with that. And plus, that's good for the third line, because whoever the left wing is, Minton, he probably won't be able to take faceoffs. So if Minton gets waved out of the draw, guess who comes in? It's Matt Poitras, who can still take faceoffs and win them pretty well. Tom, you had a point?
The other thing I just want to, and it's building off of David's point about how young Poitras is, we saw him put up, I think it was exactly a point per game in Providence this year before the playoffs.
Yep.
If he wasn't rushed into the NHL last year, and not to say he didn't earn the spot, because he absolutely did, but if he wasn't rushed in the 2023-24 season, and he was just a guy lighting it up in Providence, fans would be over the moon about him saying, throw Middlestad out the door, get this guy at 2C. Mm-hmm. So it's not like he's reached his potential yet. It's not like there isn't a lot to be excited about. It's just the way he's kind of been perceived at this point, because he's been exposed to NHL play. So I think this Poitras thing can go a lot of ways, but I'm definitely not quitting on him, because he's a kid that's shown he has the talent to be a playmaker and even drive play at the NHL level. And I think that's really important. The Bruins don't have enough of that. And if he can do that, then it's going to be one of those things, right? If you're a good enough player, you got to find a roster spot. You got to find space in the lineup. And I just don't think, as currently constructed, and I know they're planning on adding, but just right now, there's not enough talent on this roster. And you can't just, because of a backlog at center, send a guy like Matt Poitras down because, you can't have him at one position. You need as much talent as you can at this point in a retool. And he has to be a part of the team, I think.
Completely agree with that. So, behind this, it says labeled as Poitras trade. That's no. I'm gonna say I don't think so. I brought it up because I can't rule it out, especially if they're gonna try to do something at the draft to try to move up in a pick on day 2. But again, I don't see it. I mean, they traded Lettieri to the Wild last year for Lauko, so I don't know if that happened. Oh, no, I'm sorry. They traded Lettieri to the Bruins, Lauko to the Wild for Lettieri, and yet Lauko came back. Anyways, it doesn't make an ounce of sense. Last year didn't make an ounce of sense to begin with, but that so anything can really happen at the draft. But if I'm going to be completely honest, I think Poitras as the third line right wing, as long as he builds muscle, is not a bad thing. It makes it for a greasy third line. Minton and Poitras with somebody else. With somebody else on the third line. I think that's a really strong thing for the Bruins' sake. So definitely something to keep our eyes on for next season.
Quick question.
Go ahead.
Let's just say that a team calls Don Sweeney and says, I want to trade for Matt Poitras, and I want to give you guys draft capital in return. What's the lowest you'd take? So if someone called and said, hey, I'll give you a 5th.
No.
4th.
Nope.
3rd.
Nope.
2nd.
Maybe.
Second would be
I feel like a second would. Sorry, go ahead.
It depends on who the team is, where they're picking with that second round pick. If they're in the first half of the second round, sure, I'll take that. If it's a team like the Oilers, who's probably going to have a pick in the 38 in the 30s in the rounds, absolutely not. No thanks. I don't need a low second round pick. If it's a high second round pick, sure. Because remember, 21. I mean, yeah, he's played in the NHL, and I know I don't like calling him prospects, but he's still a young guy. He's still 21 years old with a full career ahead of him. So, with a ton of potential. So, I would not take him for any lower than a top 15 second round pick. That's at least
I agree.
I just think he's a sweetener at this point. Like you're not building a deal around Matt Poitras. You're adding Matt Poitras into a deal to say, hey, on top of maybe a first or a second round pick, what if we give you Poitras? Does that get the deal done? I just don't think his value is high enough yet.
Yeah, completely agree with that. Speaking of the draft, let's take a look at what the Bruins could actually do during the draft. Now, remember, the Bruins do have a lot of draft picks to work with this year. Will they use all of them? That remains to be seen. But the Bruins do have the following picks, okay? They have the 7th, 51st, 61st, 69th, nice, 100th, 133rd, 165th, and 197th. They have 8 picks in this draft, 2 of which are in the second round. They have 2 second-round picks this year. So, I think we'll only hit probably the first 3 picks here, but kind of like, Parker, I'll start with you. What direction do you think the Bruins should go with the 7th pick? I'll start with the first-round pick. Where do you think the Bruins should go with that first-round pick?
Well, I think the general consensus is that when you're in the top 10 picks of the draft, you pick the best player available. And some people say it's the first 5, some people say it's the first 10, some say it's the first 15. But for me, I think it's the first 10 picks. You take whoever the best there is available, and then you work from there. And for the Bruins, I think that there's plenty of good options. And unfortunately, they're all centers, back to Tom's point, where you're just adding into the clog. And I don't know whether they try and trade up in the draft. They have a lot of picks in the second round as well, and sort of the back edge of the third. So I don't know if maybe that's where they go, and maybe they try and trade those picks, try and move up, and maybe they go for number 5 or number 4, or you get guaranteed a guy like Frondell or Hagens or Martone, or of course Schaefer's in there as well. But who knows what's to come with Schaefer, because he's been hurt as well. So that's another guy who you don't know what he's going to be like coming back. So I think there's a lot of interesting options for the Bruins team at this draft, whether they try and trade up, whether they even try and trade back. I think there's a lot of different possibilities for them, and it's just going to be whichever one they think is going to best serve their franchise.
Yeah, completely agree. David, do you think the Bruins will use all their picks to try to replenish the prospect pool and what's coming? Or do you think they could try to sneak a deal with 1 or 2 of these picks to try to make their NHL roster better?
It's one of those reasons I'd love to have more insider knowledge about like what players are currently available via trade and what are they realistically looking for. Like obviously Rossi is a guy we've talked about a lot, right, Tom? Like his name has come up a bunch when we're talking about who's available. But the deals that we're pushing out for him are like, yeah, like do you really want to pony up that much money and that many assets for a guy like Rossi who is going to command a sizable contract now coming up in the new year and stuff. So it's like, what are you looking at? And to be fair, Don Sweeney doesn't have, I'll say, a long history of recent draft picks in the first and second round. There was an article done by Nick Goss of the of NBC Sports Boston, and he had mentioned that. Where is it? Give me 1 second. I can't find it, but it was something like the Bruins have only drafted in the second round twice in the past 6 years. They've only drafted in the first round 3 out of the last 5 or 6 years. So it's like we're not used to the Bruins having this much draft capital. So it is a fun situation for, I don't know if you want to call it fun. I'd rather be in the Stanley Cup final, but it's refreshing to be on this side of things when you look at the Bruins, because we're so used to success and you get spoiled by it a lot of times. But sometimes you do have to have a down year and, like you said, replenish that prospect pool. For me, when you're looking at who should they draft, I'm always going best player available. I don't care if it's round 1 or round 7. If they're good, you're going to make it work. If you draft 7 forwards and they're all wingers because that's the players that were there, that's what you do. You take best player available. Free agency is what you use to replenish the current roster. So I'm not looking to, and I know the NHL is a little bit different because you got to look at, these are not players that are coming in and making an impact right away, but I'm still taking best player available no matter what. I do think they're going to use the majority of these picks to deepen that prospect pool, but I wouldn't be overly surprised if we see some of the picks traded to future picks next year. I also wouldn't be surprised if they kind of combine a couple picks in order to move up if there's someone that they really like. A guy like Mason West in the second round, a very intriguing prospect given his background with hockey and football. He's decided to play hockey now, but is he going to stay in hockey or is he going to move to football after he doesn't do too well, or people push him because there's more money that way, or there's a lot of factors that you can look at. For the first round, for me, I've narrowed it down to 9 prospects that I'd be okay with the Bruins taking at this point. 8 or 9. So, I've got in no order, Denoyer, Frondell, Martone, Schaefer, Misa, Hagens, Martin, and O'Brien. And then if for some reason this Victor Eklund guy comes out of nowhere and blows everyone out of the water, he'd be like a dark horse for me to take at 7 as well. I think Robert Chalmers put up a couple tweets that had a couple of his highlights, and he looked like a stud offensively. Quick shot, looked like he was good with the two-way game. It's just I don't know if I have a bad recent history with European players, and love Fabian Lysell, but I don't know if I can go through that again. Yeah. But then if you look at a guy like Donzel Schmelis, you can look at it the other way too. So I'm going best player available no matter what in all 7 rounds. And like I said, if there's a player they're looking at that they want to get up in the second, the third, the fourth round, someone keeps slipping, I could see them kind of, combining some of those picks to move up and grab someone.
Tom?
I am actually going to go the opposite way. I am not best player available. I think you only get if things go right in this retool and you're the Boston Bruins and you're of the position that we want to be good every year, we never want to pick in this position again, how many times are you going to get the opportunity to draft a top 10 center? And I think it just so happens that you're in a draft that's center heavy, so that's going to end up falling to you. But I just feel like your prospect pool is bereft of high-end center talent, and you're kind of thin on defense right now. Besides Frederick Brunet and Jackson Edward, there's kind of a drop-off. You have guys like Elliot Grunwald at Quinnipiac, but he's years away. And a lot of the other guys are kind of just tweeners. So when you talk about the second round, I think you really have to look at defensemen with those two picks. Again, if there's a guy there that's, drops per se or is a consensus great pick, should take the forward. But I think the Bruins really need to look in the middle rounds of this draft at defensive help because their prospect pool is starting to thin out there. And when it comes to specifically the first round and that number 7 overall pick, trading up is something I've thought about a little bit. If you like Caleb Denoyer really seems like a guy that fits what the Bruins do. And when it comes to Don Sweeney, he's kind of a creature of habit in the way he works as the general manager. He likes guys that play the two-way game. He's not somebody that, really, it feels like targets high-end skill. It feels like he likes guys with good hockey sense, good motor, good defensive abilities, and then they try to build the offensive game around that. So if they could trade up maybe a spot or two to find a guy like Caleb Denoyer, I'd like that. But given the way draft prognosticators have kind of projected the first round to go, and I know it's basically Matthew Schaefer and then everybody else. And even with him, you have the injury question like Parker mentioned. So maybe Michael Misa goes 1. Who knows? Maybe someone falls back in love with James Higgins. But it seems like the Bruins are going to kind of be limited to Jake O'Brien, Brady Martin, or Roger McQueen. There's a couple other guys, but I don't want to, overload with players. And I just feel like I'm leaning towards guys. If I had to, gun to my head, Brady Martin or Jake O'Brien. Jeff Merrick was on with Billy Jaffe and Andrew Raycroft, the Morning Brew podcast, and just raved about Brady Martin. How he's a big kid. He's an old farm boy that hasn't really, had the elite coaching to mold the offensive side of his game. So he's one of those guys who, if you can get good player development around him, is somebody who can have a really high ceiling. Jake O'Brien's a guy where he's not only one of the top North American skaters, but he had one of the biggest bumps at the end of this year. So I think those are two guys you're going to be eventually looking at. McQueen, that back injury terrifies me. And I feel bad because, the kid's 17, 18 years old, and he's, they're already talking about his health long-term, but that's just the reality of the draft. So to sum up all my thoughts, I think middle of the draft, second, third round, you got to look defenseman if you're the Bruins. Take the center, because if things go well, you're never drafting in this position again. And history shows that the elite centers in the NHL come in the first round. And I think you're going to be looking at a guy like Martin, a guy like O'Brien, and a guy like McQueen.
My thing is, the Bruins goaltending behind the AHL right now is thin. I want to see the Bruins like a goalie in this draft, if possible, even if it's in the 5th or 6th round. I do want to see the Bruins go and take a goalie because I think they could really use one for the future. Because behind Bussy and DiPietro, I mean, if they re-sign Bussy, I don't think so. DiPietro might. If Bussy and DiPietro re-signs, what's behind it? I mean, there's Meyer, Svedback, and Bischel. There's they need some people. They constantly need to replenish the goaltending pool. One goalie in this draft, and I'm fine with it. Go best player available in the first overall, the first round pick, best player available, and then I agree they need to replenish defensemen. I want to see them take a winger at some point. And I want to see them pretty much just take a little bit of everything. But most importantly, go best player available at the first round pick. And after that, fill in your gaps and get a little bit of everything. I think that's kind of what I think the Bruins should do. Just overall replenish a little bit of everything. So, Parker, you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, as I sort of said off the start of this, right? It's about your top. I think top 10 is generally where you want to be. Like you're going to have good players available, whether it's a defenseman or a forward or maybe even a goalie. But I think when you look at it, it's about what's going to help the team the most. And I think it is the center position, especially at this year's draft. But it just kind of happens that they both align this year, as Tom was saying, where in recent years, you might be picking between a defenseman and a forward, both with equally potential. That's maybe when you start to go, oh, well, we might need a defenseman. But I think you look at what this team needs and what's available, especially in the early rounds, I think it lines up pretty perfectly.
Yeah, completely agree. Now let's get into the big conversation going around Bruins Nation. Who the hell is going to be the coach next year?
The Sturminator!
Let's go.
Oh my God.
Sorry, headphone users.
Sorry to headphone users. Good Lord. So Tom has made his presence felt that he wants it to be Marco Sturm as the next Bruins head coach. So here is who we're hearing has interviewed. All right. Who's going to be interviewing or has been interviewed already. Mitch Love, Jay Woodcroft, Marco Sturm, Jay Leach, and Joe Sacco. I believe that is the full list. Now, Dallas has been eliminated, so Mark's dream of Misha Donskov is not completely done just yet. The fact the Bruins have not hired a coach yet makes me think they might be trying to go after Donskov. I don't know.
Or Pete DeBoer.
Oh, no, you stop that.
Here's the thing. I don't want a goalie I don't want a coach that throws my goalie under the bus when it wasn't his fault.
It's two shots. It's tough to say.
Yeah, I gotta agree with Parker on that one. I mean,
2 shots, 2 goals.
Stop the puck, and maybe Dallas is playing another game.
One of them was a power play goal. One of them was a goal on a defensive breakdown that shouldn't have even happened. Anyways,
2 shots.
I love that argument that it was a power play goal, so he doesn't need to stop it.
Now that don't take a penalty, stupid. that's who was it? Maverick Bork hadn't been in the lineup since what, the semifinal?
Future Bruin Maverick Bork. Offer sheet this offseason. Dallas has no space. Look out for that.
Okay. Actually, you know what? That's actually not that far off. Dallas only has like less than $5 million, and they need to re-sign Ben, Duchesne, by Bork. He'll be the third Bork to play for the Bruins this century. It'll be Ray, and then I think they had Chris Bork, and now they're gonna have Maverick Bork. I don't even think he's related. I don't even know, but yeah. Anyway, I don't think I need a goal. I don't want a coach that throws my goalie under the bus. I don't know. I just don't like that personally. But I think Sturm or Woodcroft is where I'd like to see the Bruins go in that direction. If Donskov's available, go for it. Great. Marco Sturm out of the bunch, and I was really hoping that report was true that they had hired him. I was really hoping for it. If Marco Sturm is the Bruins head coach, I think it's the best option for this current leadership core because he's a players first coach. He cares about the players. The reason why Cassidy got fired was because the players didn't like him because he was a hard ass. Montgomery got fired as damage control. All right, I'm gonna put that aside. But the reason Cassidy got fired was because he was a hard ass and the players didn't like him, DeBrusque. And I think the reason they're gonna go Marco Sturm is because number one, I think Neely really likes that former Bruin still in the organization, comes back to the organization. But I also think he has a good resume. Ontario has been a pretty solid AHL team the last few years under Sturm. I would not be surprised if he brings an assistant with him if he gets hired. Don't be surprised if we see a Chris Hoscht I believe how you pronounce his last name. He's one of the assistants of the Ontario Reign. And he really likes him. Don't be surprised if they bring him over. And with news coming out that we don't think Chris Kelly's going to be back behind the bench next year on the Bruins staff, don't be surprised if, and I'm going to throw this out there, I think it was Eamon or Kenny who tossed this out in our chat, and I'm gonna put this out there. Don't be surprised if the Bruins do hire Sturm, they bring in Joe Sacco as the assistant coach to run the power play. Don't be surprised if that's what they do, because when Sacco was running the power play, I believe that was during. I believe Sacco was on the power play during the 22-23 season, I believe. You can fact check me on that. I believe he was running the power play then. And look at how good that power play was 2 years ago, right? Chris Kelly has run the power play the last 2 seasons, and it's been pretty bad. I believe the power play was the worst it had been in the 21st century this year. So I don't believe that. I'm just going to toss it out there. I think Sacco being the coach of the power play could be a good thing for him. Apparently, he was seen around Warrior Ice Arena during the same day where Sturm was apparently having his in-person interview. So I don't know what that means. Maybe it's because he's the unofficially official interim head coach right now. Spectacularly, he's still there. But I'll move this along to David. Out of the rumored names, from Woodcroft to Sturm to Donskoff to Love to Sacco or Leach, who do you think is going to be the Bruins coach? Now, who do you want? Who do you think is going to be the Bruins head coach?
So I think and want Marco Sturm.
Okay.
You set out the reasons pretty clearly. And if you want more polarizing coaching options, look at Marco Sturm and look at Mitch Love. Marco Sturm is coaching in the AHL. He has, I think the Ontario Reign had the 6th highest offensive rating in the AHL this year. Mitch Love has always been known as a defensive first type of guy. So I feel like those two are very, very, very different in terms of what you're getting out of those coaches. I don't know enough about coaches to know who has more pull in terms of what assistants are going to bring with them. So it's hard for me to sit here and say, if Marco Sturm comes, then he's bringing so-and-so to run the offense and the defense and the special teams. And same for Mitch Love. But I want an offensive-minded head coach. I want a younger head coach. I want a fresh head coach. So with those 3 things, for me, I know that Mitch Love is young as well. But for those 3 things, Marco Sturm is the one that lines up. And I think it's most plausible, Sam, like you said, because of the previous Bruins connection. We do know how important that is to Don Sweeney and Cam Neely. So, yeah, if you put everything together, Jay Woodcroft is out for me because he'd be a retread. Mitch Love is out for me because he's defense first. Sacco and Leach, I'm not even thinking about. I think Sacco and Leach would have had a much better chance of being the head coach had Don Sweeney not gotten the extension. I think that would have been a very easy 1-year scapegoat. Let's send the head coach and the GM out the door. And it's almost like a win-win. Oh, look, we signed this guy that nobody knows and we did great. Or, well, Don Sweeney shit the bed. This is the coach that he picked. We're going to ship both of them out together. So that would have worked really well together. But because he got that extension, I think you are looking at this point, I think it's down to Mitch Love, Woodcroft, and Sturm. The thing that scares me about Woodcroft that the other 2 don't have is the previous NHL head coaching experience. Obviously, Marco Sturm has head coaching experience, just not in the NHL. But I think that's where things could get a little bit spicy if they really covet that NHL coaching experience. But yeah, I'm definitely pulling for Marco Sturm at this point. I think he's an ascending head coach. I think whoever does take a chance on him is going to get a good one. And I feel very similar about Misha Donskoff. it's one of those situations where in order to have head coaching experience, you have to have someone who buys into you being a head coach. So I do think that whenever Don Scott becomes a head coach, whoever takes him on is going to get a good one as well.
Dom Tiano, the great point here. Sweeney was told to cut out the "we want to interview a coach still in the playoffs" rhetoric because the league thought it could be tampering and they didn't like it while a team was still in the playoffs. So that makes sense. I want to point out something about Mitch Love. Okay, he's kind of an unknown. I hadn't really heard of him until the name came up. So I looked him up. Okay, current assistant of the Capitals. For those who are wondering what he is, okay. He's a former coach of the Saskatoon Blades in the WHL. He was the coach there for 3 years. July 2021, he was named the head coach of the Stockton Heat, which then turned into the Calgary Wranglers, the AHL affiliate of Calgary. He was there for 2 years. And then in the middle of the 2 summers ago, he was named the assistant coach of the Capitals to work with defensemen. As you said, David, defense first is kind of Mitch Love's game. It's definitely interesting. Thank you, Jack, for correcting me. John Gruden was running the power play. Correct. Thank you. I forgot about him. Thank you very much. Sacco was running the power penalty kill, which was also finished first. That's really interesting. Tom, I'll ask the same question to you that I asked to David. If you had to pick out of the names that were rumored, who do you think is going to be the next Bruins head coach?
I do think it's going to be Sturm, although that I was a lot more confident maybe 48 hours ago before that. I think it was Cam Robinson of Elite Prospects that had the initial report. And the fact that usually when something gets leaked out from the Bruins organization, it ends up being true. So the fact that that hasn't come true is shaking my confidence a bit. But what I really like about Marco Sturm is Don Sweeney talked about in his end of the year press conference. They want the team to evolve offensively. They want a coach that can evolve the team offensively. When Marco Sturm was coach of the Ontario Reign, the LA Kings entrusted him by making him that coach with the development of guys like Brandt Clark, Quinton Byfield, and Alex Turcotte. Those are 3 guys that are now huge contributors in the Kings. Quinton Byfield, one of their best players. Turcotte is a key middle six contributor. Brandt Clark, great offensive defenseman. So I think what you get in Marco Sturm is a guy that can develop young talent, which is something this team hasn't had in a long time. And its ability not just to relate to players, but also embolden them and empower them to not just improve, but to develop. And again, that's just something huge that the Bruins haven't had. The other thing, I think Sturm is the best candidate, not just because of what he brings to the table, but what the others don't. When it came to Jay Woodcroft, I think an issue that the Edmonton Oilers had when he was there is that they just wouldn't get up for a lot of games. When you have 2 of arguably the top 5 players in the NHL and you're stumbling out of the gate, it's tough to overlook. That's part of the reason that Woodcroft got fired. And a big issue the Bruins had this year was their slow starts. Whether it was under Montgomery, whether it was under Sacco, it just felt like, that get up, that energy, that rearing to go wasn't there. And if Woodcroft's going to be the kind of guy that brings that in, I don't want that. I also heard from is Edmonton Oilers Twitter, so give it a grain of salt. He's not great playoff-wise at in-series management. He wasn't good making adjustments. So, and he just feels like a retread. He feels like the only reason he's in this coaching race right now is because he's the only one with previous head coaching experience. Mitch Love, I do like. What he's done with Washington's defense this year is really impressive. Jacob Chikrin before this year wasn't the offensive dynamo he was, and he wasn't a very good defensive defender. If you look at his advanced metrics, they weren't great. So he's really helped him turn around. He revitalized John Carlson, who is a legit top 4 defenseman after, having a couple of years of trending downward. He really swung back up. And if you look at the bottom 3 of their decor, you have a guy like Trevor Van Riemsdyk, Alexander Alexiev. These aren't, hard-hitting, stellar defensemen. And that team was able to make it to the second round against a solid Carolina team. So I do like Mitch Love. The only thing is I feel like this Bruins team has a solid core of defensemen. And I feel like they just need so much offensively that bringing in a defense-first head coach doesn't make a ton of sense. So I think the combination of Marco Sturm and a guy like Joe Sacco coming back and running the power play where he was so great, running the penalty kill where he was so great. I mean, this team's been a great penalty killing team for 15 years until last season.
Yep.
And it really took a hit after Sacco became the head coach and couldn't focus solely on that. So I think you hire a guy like Sturm who's offensive-minded, but he comes from the King system. That's another strong defensive team. So he's not completely clueless on that side of the puck. You bring in Sturm, you let him hire his offensive coaching staff, and you keep a guy like Sacco, who really has been a penalty kill whisperer for a lot of years. Although he doesn't have the experience, you have experienced guys around him. You embolden him to make offensive changes to this team and help develop your young offensive talent, whether you draft it this year, next year, or the year after. And then you go from there. But all that being said, you got to make a decision, and it's got to come soon because the draft is coming.
And the report is that they're going to make a decision like imminently. So that could be by the end of this show. That could be by tomorrow morning. That could be by Thursday. We don't really know. Hopefully it's soon. We've already had moments reacting to live news before. Wallstrom, that was a really funny moment. We were talking about that in the pregame. That was a really funny moment where Wallstrom got brought in on waivers and got claimed, and Mark, David, and I reacted accordingly. So we don't really know when they're going to hire him, but hopefully it's rather soon. Parker, again, I'll ask the same question. Who do you want? Who do you think is going to be the Bruins head coach?
So I do think Sturm will be the guy in Boston at the end of this week. I would like to see Mitch Love. I know I'm a fan of boring hockey, and I can admit that because I do think that when you play a good tactical game, we've seen it at just about every double IHF event when you see teams like Finland, who, frankly, I don't think you could name 10 of their players on any given roster, proceed to beat teams like Canada and be competitive with teams like Sweden, where Sweden has their entire roster. The Finns have barely anybody at the Four Nations as well. You could look at that as well. They find ways to beat teams that they shouldn't be beating because of their commitment to tactical defense. And I think when you look at the way Mitch Love is, what he's done, at least in Washington, he's given the defenseman ability to be active and encourages them to be active. I think you look at the way the Bruins play, you look at who they have on the back end, you could use some of that. And you get rid of guys like Carlo, who's one of your more, sort of stay-home defensemen. You look at a guy like Andrew Peeke, who I think we really saw this year at the Worlds kind of take it to that next offensive level where we know him as a defensive defenseman. You give him a little bit of that offensive side, and all of a sudden he's putting up points. And you asked me at the start of this tournament who I thought would get the least amount of points on the U.S. Defense Corps. I'd be pointing at him. And sure enough, he's one of the more offensive defenses because he's given that ability. And I think you put a guy like Mitch Love in Boston, you'll see players who you're not necessarily expecting to generate that offense become that offensive generator. So as much as, yes, the Bruins need offense and they should be focusing on offense, sometimes that offense does actually come from the defense like we saw in Washington this year.
I would introduce the thought of, would Mitch Love be the one to kind of help Mason Lohrei develop? Because like Lohrei is still, there's still pieces to his game that are still a bit away. Could Mitch Love be the one to speed up that process? Because if that's the case, great. If that would just be a cherry on top of his hiring, I'll ask myself the question. I gave all of you the chance. I think they're going to hire Sturm. I think they're going to hire Sturm. I think it is going to be the right decision in the long run is to hire Sturm. They need an offensively minded coach, and I think Sturm brings that. But if they want a defensively minded coach, Mitch Love's there. I think it's down to Love or Sturm. I wouldn't personally want Woodcroft. I want somebody fresh and new that hasn't hasn't had a head coaching job in the NHL before. So Love or Sturm is my choice. Love for if you're going to go for a defensive-based coach, and Sturm if you're going to go for an offensive-based coach. Parker?
But I also think that you look at what Washington did this year, right? You look at their team coming in. How many of you guys said that they'd even make the playoffs?
I said they sneak in as a wild card team.
Right? Like, let alone lead the Metro, win the East, right? Like stuff you weren't, and yes, they didn't win the Presidents, but they were relatively close to winning the Presidents. So I think you look at the way and how they did that, because I watched just about every Washington game because I wanted to see the Ovi chase. And it wasn't just Ovi scoring goals. It was Tom Wilson with 30. It was Protas with 30. It was, guys like Chikrin and Carlson who were jumping up in the rush. It was Alexiev, who, once again, you don't think of him as an offensive player yet. Sure enough, he's leading rushes coming down the wing. And I think you look at the way Washington played, yes, that might be a Spencer Carberry part of what they're running, but it comes a lot from guys like Mitch Love, who's working with the defense on jumping up in rushes and playing in that offensive zone, because they know that as soon as a defenseman goes up, there's another forward coming back. So as much as it might be one player, like a defenseman in the offensive end, you're just as much looking at the forwards being defensive. So I think you're playing as a 5-man unit that doesn't really designate positions as much. I think that's where you could see this Bruins team really switch it up, especially with all their two-way players.
Can never rule that out. All right, it is time for the live questions portion of the show. If you're not over on the Black and Gold Productions YouTube channel, head on over to the Black and Gold Productions YouTube channel, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, helps us out big time, and join the conversation. Would love to help us, would love to answer your questions, as we need a like spike over on YouTube. So head on over, hit that like button as hard as you possibly can. Maybe give us a Zdeno Chara slap shot right into that like button. How about that? As we are getting ready here to answer your questions. I'll actually introduce the first question. This has nothing to do with the Bruins. Who's winning the Stanley Cup? Is it going to be Florida or is it going to be Edmonton? Not who do you want. Who do you think is going to win? David?
I think it's Florida, but I want Edmonton to win. I want to see Connor get one.
Okay. Parker?
Who touched the trophy?
Edmonton did.
Who didn't touch the trophy?
Florida.
So Florida's going to win.
Can't win. Tom?
I think McDavid and Draisaitl are on a mission. That team looks different. They just got Matthias Ekholm back, which is huge. I know they lost Zach Hyman, but they look like a better defensive team, and I think that's where their breakdowns were last year against Florida. The Panthers are really good. They're really good, but I just feel like McDavid and Draisaitl are both healthy and are on a different level, so I'm going to take the Oilers.
I'm going to go Edmonton. I'm going to go Edmonton in 7. I think this series goes 7, regardless of who wins. I think we're getting another game 7 this year, and it's going to be just as good as last year's. So, if not better, because the Oilers just look like the Oilers looked like they looked like they weren't supposed to be there last year. It looked after in game 7 on that big stage, they looked like, they just kind of looked like they were there. Now I think they're more prepared. They've been there, done that. I think this is their year. And I hate to say it as an American, Canada's getting the cup back. Canada is getting the cup back, I think. Even if it's just for a year, I think Canada is getting the cup back. Let's take a look. 5 p.m. deadline to sign Jonathan Myrenberg. Do they sign him? No. That's my thoughts on that. Well, we can go around. David, Myrenberg, do you think they sign him?
I haven't seen anything that would indicate that they're interested in signing him at this point, so I'm going to say no as well.
Tom?
I would sign him because your defensive depth is so porous at this point. And from what I've seen from a couple of development camps, he's a really good skater. I like the way he moves the puck. And he's a guy who's been playing pro hockey in Sweden as a kid or, 18, 19, 20-year-old. So I would sign him. Haven't seen anything saying they will. But if it were me in that GM chair, I would.
All right. Parker?
Yeah, similar to Tom. You think back to the Studnicka trade way back in was that 22 maybe or 21?
Mm-hmm.
They tried to bury it after. I can't remember. Did they win that game by a lot or lose that game by a lot?
So I want to point out that I was actually at that game when they beat the Red Wings 5-2 in the middle of the Studnicka for DPA show trade. I was at the game when they won. The vlog's up on my YouTube channel. I was there with a couple of friends. It's up. You can go watch it now. But I was there. I actually reported it. I said, "Oh, they made a trade. We're here in the middle of the third period." I looked at my phone. Oh, they traded Stadika to the Red Wings or to the Canucks for DiPietro and for Myrenberg. So that's pretty funny.
And so to kind of finish that, like, I think it's kind of the end of that storyline. I don't think they go out and sign him, but I think they should, to Tom's point, because they are very, to quote Tom, porous at defense.
I think they should, as I agree with that. They need defensive depth, and I think they need defensive prospects. I think they should. Will they? No. Is there anything that from what I've heard about him, is there anything showing that he deserves another shot? No. So I'm going to go with no. Should they? Yes. Will they? No. Do you think Don Schmelz will make the team out of camp? No, I don't think he'll make the team out of camp. I think he's going to have a really strong camp, but I think it'll be good for him to have another year in the AHL. We talked about this earlier during the World's talk. Do I think he's going to get some games in the NHL this season? Absolutely. Does that mean he's going to be on the NHL roster full time? No. It's going to be a Merkulov experiment where he gets 4 or 5 games and gets sent down after the 5th game being a really good one. It's kind of how this is going to go. But I think he'll get some games, but he will not be a full-time NHLer until the 26-27 season, because I don't think he's going to be in the minors long. I know that. He's not going to be there long. If he keeps playing like he did in the World and with Providence and with UMass, if he keeps playing like that all year next year in Providence, without a doubt, he'll be with the NHL club during the 26-27 season. So,
Sam, to your point, here's the question for everyone: do you think we will see the return of Fabian Lysell and Georgi Merkulov?
Well, Lysell's here for another year anyway.
But do they trade them away at this point?
Merkulov's a free agent, so it's kind of up to the Bruins at this point. Lysell, I don't. Yes, I think Lysell returns. I think Merkulov's gone, unfortunately.
I think it's because he's a free agent, Georgi Merkulov. It's not up to the Bruins. It's up to him if he wants to come back and keep, running on the treadmill that is being first-line center for the Providence Bruins. If I'm Merkulov, I want out. I've proven time and time again that I belong, and I should get my shot in the NHL. And what did you do to reward me? You brought up Matt Poitras right away, and you traded for Fraser Minton. So, see ya. I'm out. Lysell's an interesting one because he did have flashes. I think he had like 3 points in his last 4 games to end the season. It was something like that, maybe 4 and 3.
Sure did.
So I know we heard rumors that they were maybe trying to ship Lysell. I think if they can swing a deal, they might use him as a sweetener, but he has to make the team, right? I mean, I don't see him taking a demotion very well.
Here's my thing real quick. I'll let it go. If Lysell does not make the NHL roster, he's requesting a trade. I think that's exactly what's going to happen. Because I don't think, knowing Lysell's personality and knowing the way he is, he's not going to take another year in the AHL. I just don't think he is. Has he done anything really to earn a full-time NHL roster spot? That's debatable. No, I don't think he's going to make the NHL roster. I think he's going to request a trade. That's my thoughts on that. David, go ahead.
2.0.
I think whoever the head coach is going to be the make or break for what Lysell becomes. I don't think he's going to get traded because I don't think his value is very high right now. And they're not going to want to just let go of a first-round pick that has potential unless they're getting something of substance back. If they go the whole year, he sits in the AHL, they get to the deadline, and someone wants to flip him for a late-round pick or something before he hits free agency, that's worst-case scenario. Best-case scenario, new head coach comes in, offensive-minded. Fabian Lysell works his way into a roster spot with the Bruins. obviously being a Lysell fan, that's what I hope for. And the thing with Lysell and Merkulov too, Providence does a really good job of not letting the kids talk to the media a whole lot. So we don't really know where their mindset is going into this season. We don't know if Merkulov wants to come back or if he wants to go. We don't know if Lysell is comfortable with where he is or if he's really upset. You're just going based on speculation because there's been nothing that's come out directly from them that says this is how they feel or this is how I feel. So it's very hard to determine what to expect. But like I said earlier in the pod, I fucking love the offseason, and it's reasons like this. You have so much speculation going into a brand new season, and people like Merkulov who are free agents. It's fun to see the storylines that get pushed when really we don't know we know what the narrative is, but we don't know what the truth is. So it's really fun to follow these storylines. I also just want to say, Dom, thank you for being here. I really, really hope that everything is going well in your life, man. Would love to hear you back on the podcast waves sooner rather than later. But love having you in the chat.
Absolutely.
Completely agree. I back that 100%. Good question here from Jack earlier in the show because we were not taking questions then. We'll answer it now. Do you think Zadorov has stepped up enough at the end of the season to deserve an A? Okay. Now, here is my only reason why they wouldn't. Hampus Lindholm exists. And I think the Bruins were missing Lindholm more than they realize. And I think a guy like him in the locker room is going to help them out. Now, if I were to choose the captains of this team, Pasternak's the captain, McAvoy and Zadorov are the A's. Can you have 3 A's? Can you have 3 A's and a captain? Can you do that, Parker? You're nodding your head.
Yes.
All right, McAvoy, Lindholm, Zadorov. Done. Taking care of that real quick. If that's what we're going to do. I think
people like – oh, sorry. Keep going, Sam. Sorry.
No. Go ahead.
I think people like Charlie McAvoy and David Pastrnak is the reason that the Bruins felt so comfortable moving on from the previous leadership core. Sam, we sat here early last year, like it might have been August, it might have been September, maybe October. And we talked about when Brad Marchand is gone, who's going to be the next captain of the Bruins. And we sat here, we threw around names. We threw around names like Charlie McAvoy. We threw around a name like Brandon Carlo. The name David Pastrnak got brought up, but we kind of shot it down because he didn't show that leadership voice. And now we're, 9 months ahead, and here we are saying, fuck, it's got to be Pastrnak and nobody else. It's so fun to follow, even like small storylines like that to see it. I could see Zadorov getting an A. I could see Hampus Lindholm getting an A. I think McAvoy definitely gets one, especially if Pastrnak is the captain. That second A will be an interesting one. I think it will come down to those two guys with an outside shot at maybe Pavel Zacha. But I think it'll come down to Zadorov or Hampus Lindholm. Another guy, by the way, Hampus Lindholm, that is, who could really benefit from a healthy offseason because fuck did the Bruins miss him last year.
Oh, you don't say.
You think?
What's that?
I said you think?
Oof.
Yeah. The minute he went down and I heard he was going to be out for weeks, I said, shit, this team's screwed. And boy, was I right about that. Not only were they screwed, they were screwed. Question for David and Parker from Neil. What has been the initial reaction around the CHL to the wave of junior players moving to the NCAA?
I'll go first if you don't mind. The reaction lately, especially after the Verhoof, and I think his name is Reshny or is it Reshny? I believe he's projected to be Verhoof is projected to be a first round pick next year, I believe, and then Reshny is projected to be a late first or early second this year. 2 kids that were playing in Saskatchewan that are going to go to North Dakota to play with Bruins prospect Will Zellers. The 2 of them are big names that just recently went to the NCAA. And there is a lot of unhappy people within CHL ranks now that are saying that it's a bad thing. It's not doing any good for CHL hockey. I would agree, because the players who are awesome are going to go to the NCAA and they're going to get paid. I think it's going to force the CHL's hand to kind of fix the way that they're doing things. The NCAA, it's all about money, right? And if you're going to go there as a top player, you're going to go there and you're going to get money. So it's something that they need to look at. I think the CHL may end up becoming like the CFL compared to the NFL when it comes to NCAA, but they really need to revamp the way that they run things, or else they're going to lose all their top prospects to the NCAA. Now, there is other situations where players go to the NCAA and they don't pan out as well as they should have, and they would have had a better draft status if they stayed in the CHL. But we're not seeing that just yet. But it will be interesting to see what players make the trip to the NCAA and bypass the CHL moving forward.
Parker?
Yeah, I think part of it too, right, is you think about kind of how it works, and you get drafted to the CHL at 16, 17, I think, somewhere in there. So you get 2 years before you would be even going down to the NCAA. So I think as much as it'll hurt the long-term CHL prospects, the majority of those prospects will either be on their way out during the draft or will be kind of like you think, look at even the London Knights this year, where there's a lot of already NHL drafted talent, and those guys would be going down the NCAA most likely, given that they wouldn't get the same kind of attention. But if there are also a lot of those top end talent going down, then all of a sudden the CHL becomes, you're going to be able to play, you're going to get some attention. So it's kind of a balancing act, I think, is what is going to end up happening. Is as much as a lot of the talent will go down to the US and to the NCAA, in the same respect, there will still be the same amount of talent up north of the border.
Completely agree with that. I'm just sending out right now. Make sure to send in some questions. Would love to get your questions in, as we only have about 10 minutes to go on the show. If you have any questions, make sure to send them over to the Black Gold Productions YouTube channel, or join the live chat wherever you are, and make sure to send in your live questions. For the first time ever, we are live on Kick. We're live on, as well as we're live on Facebook and X and YouTube and Twitch. And make sure to come on over and join the conversation. We'd love to hear some of your questions here, as we are just a couple weeks away from the NHL draft. And I'm sure we're gonna be doing a live stream during the opening night of the draft. I'll announce that. I know maybe kind of jump the gun. We'll see. But there will be a BNG live stream on Friday, June 27th, the night of the opening night of the NHL draft, NFL draft. I covered the NFL draft with my school. NHL draft, we're going to be live here opening night. And there will be a live stream on Free Agent Frenzy on July 1st. So make sure to come by on those days. We'd love to hear from you guys, as we're going to be reacting to the Free Agent Frenzy and the draft as it happens live. All right, looks like we don't have any more questions. That's going to do it for us here on episode 390 of the Black and Gold Hockey Podcast. It was a fun having you guys here on the show, and it was fun being back. I'll tell you what, we haven't had a podcast since the end of the Bruins season. We did a few live streams for the Providence Bruins playoff run, but it's nice being back talking bees with you guys. We're going to be back here hopefully soon, as we're going to be talking more in depth about the draft, and we're going to be doing some free agency predictions as well. Where do we think the Bruins go? We'll talk about all that stuff coming up in the month of June. So expect a little more uptick in content when it comes to podcasts and stuff in the month of June. Those listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, thank you very much for listening in today. If you liked what you heard, make sure to drop a 5-star rating and a nice review, and it helps us out big time, as it helps us become one of the top hockey podcasts out there. For those listening on Facebook and X and on Kick and on Twitch and on YouTube and on MySpace, or whatever other platforms we're streaming on. Thank you very much for tuning in here today. If you liked what you saw, make sure to go over to the Black and Gold Productions YouTube channel, like, subscribe, ring the bell, make sure you get notified every single time we go live or post a new video here on BNG. Make sure to go follow all of us on social media. You can go follow Parker at OnTheFly1515. You can go follow David at DC_709. Go follow Tom at T Calautti. Go follow me on Sam Smith Online T. Hopefully the next time we talk to you, the Bruins will have a head coach in place. Hopefully the next time we talk to you, the Bruins will have their mindset set for what they're going to do at the draft and in free agency. For now, for Parker, David, Tom, myself, signing off for now. We'll see you guys next time on the Black and Gold Hockey Podcast. Bye, everybody.